Wherever you're watching, welcome to the programme. Now, women's sport is again in the spotlight as its meteoric growth continues. But off the pitch, can it be successful commercially? Well, the Women's Rugby World Cup is in full swing here in England, with more than 300,000 tickets now sold. That's double the previous tournament. And football has just had another hugely successful European Championships in Switzerland, with more than 650,000 fans attending. But despite all that, it's trying to compete in a world where the 20 teams in English football's Premier League have just spent a record $4 billion on transfer fees in a single summer. Meanwhile, in the US, the NFL has just seen a blockbuster $188 million deal for just a single player, Micah Parsons, to move from the Dallas Cowboys to the Green Bay Packers for the new season. Well, with that in mind, let's look at some of the numbers around women's sports in more detail. Well, the elite level is forecast to bring in $2.35 billion this year. That's more than triple 3 years ago, as matchday sales, broadcast rights and commercial revenue, like sponsorship deals, become more valuable. Flagship events like the Olympics and World Cups have turned individual athletes into social media superstars. Ilona Maher, the USA rugby player, has more than 5 million followers on Instagram. Gymnast Simone Biles has become a household name. Now, this sort of attention is good for the sport, but also hugely appealing to brands that are looking to invest in authenticity and reach new audiences. But there's still a significant income gap when you look at the best paid female and male athletes. Cristiano Ronaldo earns more than 7 times the top spot Coco Gauff. Interestingly, 4 of 5 of the sportswomen play tennis, while the men all play team sports, apart from Tyson Fury. Well, women's basketball, followed by football or soccer, generate the most revenue, with North America and Europe now the biggest markets. So let's crunch the numbers and find out what's driving this growth with an expert from the consultancy Deloitte that advises sports teams and governing bodies about how to future-proof their businesses. She's also one of the authors of the report Beyond the $1 Billion Barrier, charting the next phase of growth. Zoe Burton, welcome to Talking Business, and talk to me about last year. 2024 was a great year for women's sport. Just talk me through the numbers.
It was fantastic. So 2024 saw 1.88 billion of revenue associated to women's sport, which was a 240% increase since 2023. And the biggest increase in revenue was all around commercial and match day. And we think the reason behind that was because of the amount of data which sports organisations now have on their fans, who's attending, who's watching, which has allowed organisations to be able to tell the story to other brands and to commercial partners, and therefore sign more lucrative contracts which are aligned to the value that these women's sports organisations are worth.
Now, of course, big sporting events, I'm thinking Women's Rugby World Cup, Women's Euros earlier in the summer. How important are these events for women's sport?
They're really important. So if we look at those major events, they are the huge points in time of being able to increase visibility and drive participation growth across many sports and across many geographies. And what we've seen over the last 2-3 years is that the attendance at these events are breaking records every single event, nearly every single match. So whether that's 650,000 fans who watched a Euro game live in Switzerland, or the 375,000 of tickets which have been sold for Rugby World Cup, which is 3 times since the last Rugby World Cup in New Zealand. But the biggest piece that we have to think about here is that deliberate action needs to be taken after these big moments to be able to drive the domestic success for leagues and clubs, as that's what's going to bring the ongoing revenue growth and the ongoing sustainability of women's sport. So in the UK, how is the success of the Lionesses going to drive fans to go and attend a WSL match this season, or a Red Roses fan attend and buy a ticket to the PWR?
So talk me through that. How do you bring in, new fans at these big flagship events, and then how do they translate through the rest of the year? How do you make sure you keep getting money off them throughout the rest of the year?
What we know around kind of women's sports fans is that overall it's a younger demographic and it's also more female fans. So as we look towards kind of creating a more commercially viable product, we need to focus on those two elements. So female fans are more likely to follow individuals and are 3.5 times more likely to be influenced by something which an athlete is promoting. So how you turn and utilize those athletes as part of authentic brand opportunities is a key metric when you look at kind of driving commercial viability. And then also the younger demographic and how you create the opportunities for the next generation of fans to get involved. And I think when we think about women's sport, it's also about doing things differently. For example, they're a lot more likely to come with their families and come with a larger group of friends. So it may be that you're kind of increasing the experiences which are on offer. I think the other piece which is really important is around the opportunities that fall around merchandising and licensing. Females drive 70 to 80% of household decisions. That is something which needs to be tapped into as part of this new audience. And the female fans buy 1.7 items of merchandise a year, whereas men buy the same amount every 3 years. So making sure there is the appropriate merchandise available for sale and new types of merchandise is where we expect to see continued growth of revenue within women's sport.
Now, we know as well that all the big money at the moment in things like basketball and football or soccer, depending where in the world you are. Talk to me about the potential, though, for other sports. And I'm thinking particularly in large parts of Africa with a huge market there, cricket is growing in importance. Where are you seeing the biggest growth in terms of, interest, but also in terms of money?
So outside North America and Europe, I think Asia, as you just pointed out, has a huge opportunity. So particularly as well, Australia, they're seeing quite a lot of growth over the last kind of 2 to 3 years, which has been driven by the Matildas effect, which is the equivalent to the Lionesses in the UK. But for cricket, I think what we've just seen within the UK in terms of the investment into the 100, where 49% stakes of the franchises have been sold for over £500 million, was that the women's team is a significant part of that and a significant part of what the 100 has to offer to its fans. And the overarching fan experience that is being created is very aligned to kind of promoting that family experience. A lot more female fans have been recorded going this season, and I think that should set the path for women's cricket growth globally as well.
Yeah, and it's a bit of a chicken and egg thing, isn't it? About what comes first. Is it, the grassroots interest that's driving it and then everybody else catches up, be that investors or sponsors or broadcasters to cover it? Or is it that, we need all of that stuff to make it available so people can access it and find a new love of women's sport? I mean, what does come first?
So we see this as a virtuous cycle. The ability for the on-pitch performance to inspire grassroots is fundamental, but then also we do see a linkage between those who are playing on a regular basis and how that links to fandom, as well as also then the more people within that kind of grassroots and then moving on to elite performance is going to continually grow and improve the product because you've got more available players who essentially can play and therefore grow leagues. So we very much see this as a virtuous cycle. So you can't invest in one or the other. You do have to try and approach this looking at all the different parts that make up women's sport for it to be successful.
Zoe, so good to have you on the programme this week. Thank you.
Thank you.
So that's the big picture, but what does it mean in practice? Well, to find out, I've been speaking to one woman who's literally betting on the potential of female athletes. She's the co-founder of Mercury13. It's a company with the goal of investing $100 million in football teams across Europe and Latin America. Victoire Cogevina Reynal, welcome to Talking Business. It's good to have you here. And first of all, talk to me about why you invest in women's football.
I believe the answer to that question is easy, but has definitely changed over the course of the last 2 years since we started the company. Women's football and women's sports, more generally speaking, have been completely undervalued by the market for decades. And right now we're seeing a lot of that value materialize with fandoms increasing at record speeds, and obviously the product on the pitch becoming better and better. And so when we launched the company in August of 23, I had a vision that remains the same, which is building for women's football clubs that speak to a new audience. And, that is what we're doing and intending to continue doing.
Now, correct me if I'm wrong, a lot of this is about women supporting other women, isn't it? It's like female founders often supporting young female entrepreneurs. How important is that element?
Absolutely. I think the only reason why we speak about women supporting women is more about having the right people in positions of decision making. As a woman, I can understand and relate much better with the women that I end up serving, whether they're on the pitch or off the pitch. And so that voice is critical, given this is a product for them, is critical, if not impossible to do without.
Now, talk to me about what that investment looks like. What does the money get used for? What difference does it make?
It's fairly simple and straightforward. Today, there is a huge need to build sustainable business models around these women's football teams. For decades, they've depended on a men's team in most cases, or on a local federation, sometimes even governments and other subsidies that were available to them. Now, if we're looking to the next 100 years of women's football, we must find a way for them to be sustainable. And the way that we are investing our funds into it is exactly for that.
Now, I know your goal is to be investing $100 million in women's football. I guess, first of all, do you have that money? And if so, where will you invest it?
So we've, at the beginning of this year, partnered with Avenue Sports, which is a private equity fund founded by Mark Lazar in the United States. We are looking to build a portfolio of, how many clubs we can get, specifically starting in Europe at the moment, very focused on the top 5 markets here, which we started with Italy, and next up we'll have Spain and the UK, as well as France and Germany. And the way that we're looking to deploy the capital is ensuring that not only are we acquiring majority stakes, which then gives us control of those clubs, but also being able to resource the clubs and build them into commercial engines so that they can continue growing after we're gone.
Now, one of the biggest challenges is making those investments pay off. I know you've talked about making sure that these businesses are sustainable and profitable. What does that look like?
Well, it's a rapidly changing ecosystem right now. I think people that have operated in the football space in the last 50 years have an understanding of how to build a profitable business that might be very different in the women's side of things. Firstly, broadcasting deals are nowhere near what they are on the men's game. And secondly, sponsorship is starting to take a shape that we haven't seen on the men's game quite never, actually, just because they're a very different type of partnership that you're generating with brands coming into the game and supporting from a founding perspective almost the growth of it. So we believe the revenue streams are gonna change dramatically. There's already some early data that suggests so, not only in football but across other women's sports as well.
So let's talk about what that looks like in reality. Now, you've invested a lot of money in the Italian team, FC Como. What does that investment do, and how do you turn that into a sustainable, profitable business?
So Como Women was our inaugural club. We acquired it in March of last year, in March of 24. And we've taken a club that was operating independently in the Serie A Femminile. We rebranded the club completely, changed everything from its crest to its colors to the way it communicates. We started really building all the fundamental kind of elements that you need to start commercializing a club like that, all with the idea that anything that we would generate commercially through those endeavors will be reinvested on the pitch. So for us, obviously, sporting performance is very important, not only from the business that we're running, but also to protect our investments. And we've seen great results. Everything from the CEO that we've put in place and the team that he's built around himself to what we're seeing on the pitch with better players with international experience that are coming to the club and they're choosing to be a part of a project. So we're seeing some early data points and some early opportunities that are making us very bullish to where we can take this club in the next 10 years.
And a final thought, you've talked about women's football, your desire to make it bigger than men's football. How optimistic is that? How realistic is that? And what time frame are we talking about here?
Now that I've been in the space and understand the power that these athletes have and the element of really moving societal change alongside them has made me believe that within the next 10, 20, 30 years, we're going to see a huge shift in terms of the role of women's sports globally speaking. And we've already seen this in the US. It's happening every day. Now it's time for it to come to Europe, and we believe it's going to happen through our clubs. But ultimately, it all goes down to the fact that more women are going to play sports, more women are going to want to be on the pitch, and more women are going to want to be a part of seeing and watching it and bringing their own families and their own friends into it. So, whether it's going to be bigger than men's football or not, that I don't think is really the topic at discussion. It's more about what is the scale that this can have, and can we imagine, many, many women around the world, millions and not hundreds of millions, really consuming a sport that historically and for the last 100 years had been for men only.
Victoire, so good to have you on the programme this week. Thank you.
Thank you.